Let me tell you something that nobody in the financial industry wants to admit. The reason you are not wealthy has almost nothing to do with how hard you work. It has almost nothing to do with your intelligence. It has almost nothing to do with your access to opportunity, your level of education, or what country you were born in. The reason you are not wealthy is that every single morning, before you even open your eyes, your brain runs a program. And that program was installed in you when you were 6 years old, sitting in a classroom, learning to follow instructions. The program runs quietly in the background, invisible, automatic, powerful. It shapes what you think about, what you reach for, how you make decisions, and what you believe is possible. And it has been running uninterrupted for decades. I call this program the employee operating system. Most people go through their entire lives without ever knowing it exists. They wake up, they run the program. They go to work, they come home, they watch television, they go to sleep, and they do it all again tomorrow. And they wonder at the end of 40 years why the math never added up, why they worked so hard and have so little to show for it. They blame the economy, they blame the government, they blame bad luck. But the truth is simpler and more uncomfortable than any of that. You cannot run an ownership strategy on an employee operating system. The hardware and the software are incompatible. You can read every book ever written about investing. You can study every financial chart. You can memorize every principle I have ever spoken publicly. But if the program running underneath all of that still belongs to the employee, you will keep arriving at the same destination. You will keep trading your time for money. You will keep making decisions from a place of scarcity and fear. And the wealth will keep sliding through your fingers like water through a cracked cup. Today I want to talk about something specific, something practical, something I rarely discuss in public because most people are not ready to hear it. I want to talk about 4 routine changes, 4 specific daily shifts in behavior that begin to uninstall the employee operating system and replace it slowly, methodically with the ownership mindset. These are not motivational slogans. They are not abstract philosophy. They are concrete changes in the daily architecture of your life that, compounded over time, produce a fundamentally different human being and a fundamentally different financial result. I have spent over 70 years studying what separates the people who build generational wealth from the people who spend their lives working for someone who already has it. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, it is not what happens in the boardroom. It is not what happens on the trading floor. It is not even what happens in a bank. It is what happens in the first 2 hours of your morning. It is what happens in the quiet moments before the world starts demanding your attention. It is what happens in the accumulated small decisions that most people never think to examine. The wealth is built in the routine, or it is destroyed there. Let us begin. The first routine change: stop consuming, start producing before noon. The we-are. There is a law in physics called the law of entropy. It states that without the continuous input of energy, all organized systems tend toward disorder. They decay, they collapse, they return to chaos. Your mind is an organized system, and every morning, the moment you wake up, the world begins applying entropy to it. You pick up your phone and you scroll, you see the news, you see someone else's success on social media. You see an advertisement for something you cannot afford. You see a political argument that makes your cortisol spike before you have finished your first cup of coffee. You watch a 15-second video, then another, then another. Before you have done a single productive thing, before you have generated a single unit of value for yourself or anyone else, you have spent 45 minutes consuming the output of other people's minds. And here is the cruel irony. The person who filmed that video you watched, they were producing. The person who wrote that article, they were producing. The corporation that designed the algorithm to keep you scrolling, they were producing a product, and you were the product. Every minute you spend consuming in the morning is a minute you have donated to someone else's wealth-building system. Now, I want to be precise here. I am not telling you that consumption is inherently bad. I read 500 pages a day. I am a consumer of information at an almost industrial scale. But there is a critical difference between consuming as a form of passive entertainment and consuming as a form of raw material for production. And there is an even more critical difference in the timing. The human brain in the first 2 hours after waking is in a neurological state that scientists call the hypnopompic transition. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning, creative thinking, and executive decision-making, is at its peak glucose availability. The default mode network is shifting from dreamlike states to focused awareness. In plain language, your brain is at its most powerful, most creative, most strategically capable in the hours immediately after you wake up. This is the moment the employee operating system tells you to check what other people are doing. This is the moment the ownership mindset tells you to build something. I have had the same morning routine for the majority of my adult life. I wake up. I do not touch a phone. I do not read emails. I do not engage with anything that requires a reaction from me. Instead, I read. I think. I write down ideas. I work on problems. I produce something. Even if that production is just a sharper mental model, a clearer understanding of a business, a better question to ask, by the time most people are finishing their morning scroll, I have already done the most important intellectual work of my day. Now you might say, Warren, I have to check my phone. I have responsibilities. I have messages to answer. And I understand that, but I want you to notice something. The urgency you feel when you look at your phone in the morning, that urgency is manufactured. The emails, the messages, the notifications, they were all generated by other people's agendas, not yours. Every time you respond to someone else's agenda before you have addressed your own, you are starting the day as an employee. You are starting the day reacting, not directing. The wealthy do not start their days reacting. They start their days producing. Here is the routine change I am asking you to make. For the first 90 minutes after you wake up, 90 minutes, not a full day, not a week, just 90 minutes, you produce before you consume. You write something, you build something. You study something you are working to master. You think about the problems that matter to your financial future. You work on the side project, the skill, the investment thesis, the business idea. You do this before you look at your phone, before you read the news, before you check anyone else's scorecard. This sounds so simple that most people dismiss it. They think 90 minutes in the morning, how much could that possibly matter? Let me give you the mathematics. 90 minutes a day is 32 hours a month. It is nearly 400 hours a year. In 10 years, that is 4,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell famously described the 10,000-hour threshold for mastery. At 90 minutes a day, you are halfway to mastery in a decade, and you have sacrificed nothing but your morning scroll. But the compound effect goes far deeper than hours law. When you begin your day in production mode, you set the psychological frame for every decision that follows. Your brain does not simply compartmentalize its morning and then forget it by noon. The neurological state you establish in the morning creates momentum that carries through the entire day. Researchers at Stanford have documented what they call the priming effect. The state you put your brain in at the start of a task determines the cognitive quality of everything that follows. The employee starts the day reactive and stays reactive. The owner starts the day generative and stays generative. This is not a motivational metaphor. This is neuroscience, and it accumulates. Charlie Munger once told me something I have never forgotten. He said, the most important thing you can do is control what enters your mind in the first hour of the day, because that hour sets the frame through which you interpret every experience that follows. If the first hour teaches your brain that its job is to react to external stimuli, it will spend the rest of the day looking for stimuli to react to. If the first hour teaches your brain that its job is to create, it will spend the rest of the day looking for things to create. You are programming yourself. The question is, who is writing the code? Make the change. 90 minutes every morning. Produce before you consume. Start small if you must. 15 minutes at first, then 30. Then an hour. Build the habit slowly and let it compound. Within 6 months, this single change will have altered the fundamental orientation of your thinking more than any investment seminar or self-help book you have ever purchased. You will start to feel the difference long before you can measure it in dollars. You will feel it as a kind of quiet confidence, a sense of direction, a steady growing certainty that you are moving towards something rather than simply reacting to everything. That feeling is not an accident. It is the early signal of the ownership operating system beginning to load. The second routine change, conduct a daily owner's review instead of checking your paycheck. Let me tell you about two very different ways of thinking about money. And I want you to pay close attention, because the difference between these two mental models is, over a lifetime, the difference between poverty and financial independence. The employee thinks about income. Every month, they wait for the number that arrives in their bank account. They think about how much they earned. They think about whether they can afford the things they want. They think about their salary, their hourly rate, their overtime. Their entire financial relationship with the world is structured around money that comes in as a function of time they have spent. The owner thinks about value. Every day they ask themselves, what assets do I own? What is generating returns while I sleep? What did I build this week that will still be working for me next year? Their financial relationship with the world is structured around money that comes in as a function of systems they have created. This is not a small philosophical difference. It is the fundamental architecture of how wealth actually works. Consider the mathematics. An employee who earns $50,000 a year and saves 10%, $5,000, is accumulating wealth at a rate entirely determined by the number of hours they can sell. They are running a linear equation. If their expenses rise, they must sell more hours. If they get sick, the income stops. If the economy shifts and their skill becomes obsolete, they must start over. The ceiling of this model is hard, physical, and real. An owner who earns $50,000 a year but converts even a fraction of that into productive assets, a share of a business, an index fund, a skill that generates leveraged income, is building a second engine. At first, that engine is small, embarrassingly small. The returns are negligible, but the engine does not get tired. It does not sleep. It does not ask for a raise. And every year, it compounds, it grows, it adds more engines of its own. This is what I mean when I talk about the snowball. The important thing is finding wet snow in a very long hill. The first few rotations are painfully slow. The snowball is tiny. People laugh at it. But if you keep rolling it, if you do not stop, if you protect it from melting, eventually the physics change. The momentum builds, the mass increases, the speed accelerates, and at some point, the snowball is moving faster than any human could have pushed it. It is moving entirely on its own. Most people never get there, not because the mathematics fail them, but because they never change the daily habit of how they review their financial life. Here is the specific routine change I am asking you to make. Every evening, not monthly, not weekly, but every evening, spend 15 minutes conducting what I call the owner's review. This is a brief, structured examination of your financial position through the lens of an owner, not an employee. The review has three components. The first component is asset inventory. What do you own that is working for you right now? This might be a small amount in an index fund. It might be a side project generating $20 a month. It might be a skill you are developing that will eventually command higher rates. Whatever it is, you look at it, you acknowledge it, you ask, what did this asset do for me today? The reason this matters is not purely financial, it is psychological. The employee never asks this question because they have no assets to review. But the moment you begin asking the question, even when your assets are trivially small, you are training your brain to think in terms of ownership. You are installing a new lens through which you interpret your financial reality. And the brain, as I have observed for 9 decades, tends to find what it is trained to look for. If you train it to look for income opportunities, it finds them. If you train it to look at asset growth, it begins to see asset building opportunities everywhere. The second component is the liability audit. What is costing you money without creating any value? The employee mindset almost never asks this question. The ownership mindset is obsessed with it. I look at every dollar that leaves my possession and I ask, is this dollar buying me a future return, or is it simply gone? The car payment that depreciates the moment you drive off the lot, that is a liability. The subscription you forgot about 4 months ago, that is a liability. The habit of eating out every day because you are too depleted to cook, that is a liability, compounding quietly in the background. I am not asking you to live like a monk forever. I am asking you to see the mathematics clearly and make conscious choices rather than letting your money leak away through 1,000 small holes you never bothered to examine. The third component is the empire question. The empire question is this: what did I do today that my future self will still be benefiting from 5 years from now? This is the most important question. It is also the one the employee operating system was never designed to ask. The employee operating system is entirely oriented toward the immediate present. Did I complete today's tasks? Did I satisfy today's requirements? Did I receive today's compensation? These are the questions that define success within the employee frame. They are not wrong questions, but they are dangerously incomplete. The ownership frame adds a dimension. It adds time. It asks not just what happened today, but what did I plant today that will still be growing in a decade? When I bought my first shares of a business as a young man, I was not thinking about this week's price. I was thinking about the earning power of that business in 10 years. When I learned to read balance sheets, I was not thinking about the immediate application. I was building a cognitive asset that would compound in value for the rest of my life. When I chose to live in Omaha rather than on Wall Street, I was making a decision whose benefits would not fully manifest for years. The mental clarity, the distance from the noise, the ability to think in decades rather than quarters. Every day, you are either planting trees or burning them. The empire question forces you to look honestly at which one you are doing. Now, I want to address the objection I can already hear forming in your mind. You are thinking, Warren, I work a full-time job. I have children. I have obligations. I am exhausted by 6 o'clock. I do not have the energy for a financial review. I understand this. I am not asking you for energy you do not have. I am asking you for 15 minutes. 15 minutes of directed attention applied consistently every evening. The mathematics of 15 minutes a day are not obvious until you zoom out. 15 minutes a day is 90 hours a year. 90 hours of deliberate, focused attention on building an ownership mindset. In 5 years, that is 450 hours. That is an extraordinary education. That is a transformation. But the deeper point is not the hours. The deeper point is the identity shift that happens when you conduct this review daily. Every time you sit down and ask ownership questions, you are voting for a new identity. You are telling your brain, I am someone who owns assets. I am someone who thinks in systems. I am someone who is building something. Identity drives behavior, and behavior compounded over time drives outcomes. The employee who never reviews their assets stays an employee, not because they lack intelligence, not because opportunity was denied to them, but because they never made the daily choice to practice thinking like an owner. The ownership mindset is not a gift. It is not a genetic trait. It is a practice. And like all practices, it must be practiced daily, or it atrophies. 15 minutes every evening, the asset inventory, the liability audit, and the empire question. Do this for 1 year without interruption, and then come back and tell me your relationship with money has not fundamentally changed. I will be surprised. The third routine change: replace 1 hour of passive entertainment with deliberate skill compression. There is an economic principle that most people understand in theory, but almost nobody applies to their own life. It is called the law of comparative advantage. It states that the greatest returns come not from being competent at many things, but from being extraordinarily capable in the specific areas where your unique combination of talents and knowledge creates an edge that others cannot easily replicate. In the world of business, this is called a moat, a competitive moat. The thing that makes you irreplaceable, the thing that makes what you offer so uniquely valuable that the market has no easy substitute for it. Every person has the potential to build a moat around their earning power. Most people never do. Not because they lack talent, but because the employee operating system never told them that was their job. The employee operating system told them to be competent enough to keep the job they have, not to become so exceptional in a specific area that the market comes looking for them. I want to talk about what I call the deliberate skill compression hour, and I want to start with the problem it is designed to solve. The average person in the modern world spends between 3 and 5 hours every day consuming passive entertainment. Television, social media, streaming services, casual internet browsing. I am not making a moral judgment about this. I am making a mathematical observation. 3 to 5 hours a day, compounded over a decade, is 10,000 to 18,000 hours. That is enough time, if spent differently, to achieve world-class mastery in any field you chose. But the employee operating system does not frame leisure time as a resource to be invested. It frames leisure time as the reward for having survived the workday. You worked hard. You suffered through the meetings and the emails and the performance reviews. Now you get to sit on the couch and consume. You earned it. And in one sense, this is psychologically understandable. Recovery is real. Depletion is real. But there is a profound difference between genuine recovery, sleep, physical exercise, time in nature, quiet conversation, and passive numbing. Passive entertainment does not restore you. It simply postpones the awareness of your depletion while adding nothing to your capabilities. Meanwhile, somewhere in your city right now, there is someone who is spending that same hour building something, learning something, getting 1% better at something that is going to matter. And they are doing it not with frantic intensity, the kind that burns out in a week, but with quiet, deliberate consistency, the kind that compounds. The deliberate skill compression hour is not about grinding until you collapse. It is about identifying one skill that, if developed to an extraordinary level, would compound your earning power, your independence, or your ownership capability, and then spending one focused hour each day advancing that specific skill. 1 hour. Not 5, not 10, 1. I want to explain why I am so insistent on the singular focus, because I know the instinct is to say, I will learn investing and learn to code and learn to write and learn sales and learn marketing. This instinct is precisely the failure mode I described earlier. The enemy is not laziness. The enemy is dispersion. When you spread 1 hour across 5 skills, you advance each by 12 minutes. 12 minutes of attention produces almost nothing. But 1 hour of focused, deliberate practice on a single skill, that is the unit of work that moves the needle. Here is how to choose the skill. Ask yourself this question. If I became genuinely excellent, not good, not competent, but genuinely excellent at this one thing, what would happen to my earning power, my independence, or my ability to build assets? Let me give you examples of what excellent looks like in practice, because I find that people underestimate the threshold they are aiming for. If you learn to communicate, to write with clarity and persuade with precision, you gain the ability to sell ideas, to raise money, to attract customers, to lead organizations. Communication is the most universally valuable skill in the human economy because it multiplies every other capability you already have. A brilliant engineer who cannot communicate is trapped inside their own head. A moderately talented person who can communicate with extraordinary clarity will always outperform the brilliant engineer in the marketplace of human cooperation. Always. I paid $100 for a Dale Carnegie speaking course when I was in my early 20s. The return on that investment, compounded across my lifetime, is incalculable. The ability to stand in front of people and articulate an idea changed everything. If you learn to read financial statements, to look at a balance sheet and understand the underlying economics of a business with genuine depth, you gain a capability that very few people possess and that the market rewards enormously. Most people are financially illiterate, not because they are unintelligent, but because the education system never taught them this language. If you spend 1 hour a day for 2 years learning to read businesses through their numbers, you will occupy a position of knowledge that gives you a permanent edge. If you learn to sell to identify what someone genuinely needs and to communicate how a product or service addresses that need with precision and integrity, you become nearly impossible to replace. Sales is the engine of every economy. Every business, every organization, every human endeavor depends on someone's ability to persuade. The person who can sell is never unemployed, never purely dependent on a salary, never fully at the mercy of someone else's evaluation. They generate their own demand. If you learn to code even at a basic functional level, you gain access to the leverage of software. You gain the ability to automate, to build, to create systems that work without you. In the previous generation, this was a specialized skill. Today, it is increasingly a foundational one. The person who understands how digital systems work will spend the rest of their career upstream of the person who does not. The principle applies to any skill where excellence creates leverage, where being genuinely extraordinary allows you to generate value that scales beyond the direct hours you invest. Now, let me be precise about what deliberate means. Deliberate practice is not the same as practice. Most people have the experience of doing something repeatedly without getting meaningfully better at it. They drive a car every day for 20 years and never become a better driver than they were at year 2. They have a conversation every day of their lives and never develop more clarity or precision as a communicator. Repetition without reflection does not produce growth. Deliberate practice means you are working at the edge of your current capability. It means you are actively struggling with something slightly beyond your present level of mastery. It means you are getting feedback from your own critical analysis, from mentors, from the results your work produces in the real world. It means you are adjusting based on that feedback. It means every session ends with a sharper understanding of where your gap is and what you are going to do tomorrow to close it. This is not comfortable. Deliberate practice, by definition, is the experience of being not yet good enough at something. The employee operating system hates this experience. It prefers the comfort of existing competence. It prefers doing things you already know how to do reasonably well, because that feels like productivity without the discomfort of inadequacy. The ownership operating system treats inadequacy as information. It says, here is where the gap is. Here is what I need to build. Let me get to work. 1 hour, every day, deliberate, focused, uncomfortable, compounding work on the single skill that will most expand your leverage in the world. In 6 months, you will be noticeably better. In 2 years, you will be significantly better. In 5 years, you will be in the top 10% of people who possess that skill. And in 10 years, if you have chosen wisely and compounded consistently, you will have built something genuinely rare, something the market will pay for at a different scale than it pays for ordinary competence. I want to add one more dimension to this routine change because I think it is underappreciated. The deliberate skill compression hour is not only about the skill you are learning, it is about the person you are becoming in the process of learning it. Every hour you spend in deliberate practice is an hour of evidence that you are the kind of person who builds, who invests in their future, who chooses discomfort today for capability tomorrow. This evidence accumulates and it shapes how you see yourself, and how you see yourself determines what you are willing to attempt. And what you are willing to attempt determines the ceiling of your financial and personal achievement. The employee operating system tells you who you already are. The ownership operating system tells you who you are becoming. That difference, that forward orientation, is not a small thing. It is the axis on which entire life trajectories turn. Replace 1 hour of passive entertainment with deliberate skill compression. Do it daily, do it for years, and watch what the compounding does. The fourth routine change: end every day by asking the compounding question. We have talked about the morning. We have talked about the daily financial review. We have talked about the deliberate skill hour. Now I want to talk about how you close the day, because how you close a day determines how you open the next one. And how you open the next one determines the entire trajectory of the one that follows. Most people end their day in one of two ways. The first is collapse. They fall into bed exhausted, without any reflection on what happened, what they learned, or what they should do differently tomorrow. The second is rumination. They replay the frustrations of the day, the irritations, the failures, the things that did not go as planned. Both of these endings share something in common. They are passive. They happen to you rather than being shaped by you. The ownership operating system ends the day with a specific directed question, a question I call the compounding question. And it goes like this: what did I do today that I cannot undo tomorrow? This sounds like a strange question. Let me explain what it is actually asking. Every day you take actions that have consequences that extend beyond today. Some of these actions are obvious. You made an investment, you had a difficult conversation, you made a promise, but most of them are invisible. You spent an hour learning something. You were patient in a moment when you wanted to react. You saved $50 instead of spending it. You said no to a distraction that would have felt good in the moment, but would have drained energy from the things that matter. You wrote a paragraph in the project you are building. None of these actions feel monumental in the moment. In isolation, the hour you spent studying is worth almost nothing. In isolation, the $50 you saved is worth almost nothing. In isolation, the paragraph you wrote is worth almost nothing. But they are not in isolation. They are in a chain of daily compounding actions that over years and decades build something of extraordinary power. The compounding question asks you to identify at the end of each day the irreversible positive action you took, the thing that is now part of the chain, regardless of what happens tomorrow, the thing that cannot be taken back. This matters for a reason that goes beyond simple reflection. It matters because the act of consciously identifying your compounding action each day reinforces the identity that makes further compounding actions more likely. Every time you say, "Today I did something that my future self will benefit from," you strengthen the neural pathway that makes it more natural to do so again tomorrow. You are not just tracking actions, you are building an identity. And identity, as I said earlier, is the engine underneath all behavior. The compounding question also has a darker cousin. The question is, did I do anything today that is eating the future? Did I add to debt that is compounding against me? Did I damage a relationship through carelessness? Did I make a decision I will pay for later? Did I give in to the short-term reward at the expense of the long-term result? Not every day will have a clean answer to this. Some days the honest answer is, I was not building today, I was surviving. That is real. That is human. But the question asks you to look honestly, not just at what felt good, but at what the mathematics will say about it a year from now. I have practiced a version of this reflection for most of my adult life, not with formal ritual or written journals, but in the quiet before sleep, a brief, honest accounting of the day through the lens of compounding. What grew today? What was planted? What was harvested prematurely at the cost of future yield? The man who does this consistently builds a different relationship with time. He stops thinking in days. He starts thinking in decades. And this shift, this almost geological extension of the time horizon, is one of the most powerful competitive advantages available to any human being. Here is something that most financial commentators fail to appreciate. The single greatest edge in wealth building is not intelligence. It is not access to information. It is not even capital, though capital helps. The single greatest edge is patience, the ability to wait, the ability to plant and then leave the seed alone, the ability to resist the constant temptation to dig up the roots to see if they are growing. Most people cannot do this, not because they lack discipline in the traditional sense, but because they are living in the present moment, making decisions that feel right today without any real visceral connection to what those decisions mean in 10 years. The future is abstract to them. It is theoretical. It does not bleed. It does not demand anything. So it loses. The compounding question is a technology for making the future concrete. When you identify your compounding actions each day, you build a felt sense of the chain you are constructing. You begin to feel the future. You begin to feel the weight and the momentum of what you are building. And when the temptation to spend impulsively or abandon a project or choose comfort over capability presents itself, you have something real pushing back, not an abstract principle, but a felt chain. A chain you have been building link by link, day by day, and that you are unwilling to break. There is a story I think about often about a woodcutter and a traveler. The traveler passes through a forest and sees a woodcutter, old and bent, laboring slowly to cut down a tree with a dull, rusted saw. The traveler stops and says, "Friend, wouldn't it go faster if you sharpened the saw?" The woodcutter does not look up. He says, "I cannot stop to sharpen the saw. I am too busy cutting." Most people are too busy living to examine how they are living. They are too consumed by the urgent demands of today to stop and ask whether today is building toward the life they want in 30 years. The compounding question is sharpening the saw. It takes 5 minutes. It costs nothing. And over a lifetime, it determines everything. Let me bring together the 4 routine changes and show you what they look like as a system. Because individually, each one is meaningful, but together they form something qualitatively different. They form an architecture of daily life that is structurally oriented toward wealth accumulation in the deepest sense, not just financial wealth, but the compounding of capability, judgment, and ownership thinking. The first change, producing before you consume in the morning, establishes the psychological frame of ownership at the start of the day. You begin as a creator, not a reactor. Your brain loads its most important tasks first, before the noise of the world has a chance to install its own priorities. The second change, the owner's review each evening, keeps your assets, your liabilities, and your empire question in constant view. You are never allowed to go more than 24 hours without looking at the financial reality of your life through the lens of an owner. This constant attention to the ownership questions gradually makes ownership thinking automatic. It becomes the default, not the exception. The third change, 1 hour of deliberate skill compression daily, is the engine of your personal capital accumulation. Every day, you are compounding the asset that no government can tax and no market can crash, your own capability and knowledge. You are building a moat around your value in the world, 1 hour at a time. The fourth change, the compounding question before sleep, provides the daily accounting that makes the chain visible. You can see what you are building, you can feel the weight of it, you are reminded every night that today mattered, that the choices you made today are now part of something permanent. So together, these 4 changes do something remarkable. They change the temporal frame through which you experience your own life. Instead of living day to day, you begin to live in decades. Instead of asking, what do I want today, you ask, what am I building toward? And this shift in temporal frame, this extension of the horizon, is, I believe, the single most powerful predictor of financial success available to ordinary human beings. I did not build Berkshire Hathaway by making brilliant decisions every day. I built it by having a framework of daily habits that kept my thinking oriented toward the long term, the systematic, the compounding. The specific investments changed. The specific decisions changed. The world around me changed continuously for over 70 years. But the framework, the daily orientation toward building rather than reacting, toward ownership rather than employment, toward compounding rather than consuming, remained constant. And that constancy over decades produced the result. I want to close with something that does not appear in most financial discussions, because I think it is the most important truth of all, and it gets buried under the mathematics and the strategy and the formulas. Changing your daily routine is not primarily about changing your bank account. It is about changing who you are. The 4 changes I have described today are not financial techniques. They are identity practices. They are the daily choices through which you vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Every morning you produce before you consume. You vote for the identity of a creator. Every evening you conduct your owner's review. You vote for the identity of someone who takes responsibility for their financial life. Every hour you spend in deliberate skill compression, you vote for the identity of someone who is growing. Every night you ask the compounding question, you vote for the identity of someone who is building something that outlasts the day. These votes accumulate, and over months and years, they solidify into a character, into an operating system, into a way of moving through the world that is fundamentally different from the way the employee operating system moves through the world. I have watched people transform, not quickly, not dramatically, not with the kind of sudden revelation that makes for exciting stories, but slowly, quietly, with the grinding and steady power of compound interest applied to daily habits. I have watched people go from the poverty loop to genuine independence, and in every case, the inflection point was not a single lucky break or a hot stock tip or a miraculous inheritance. The inflection point was a change in daily practice that shifted the underlying orientation of their thinking. It started before the money changed. It started when the daily routine changed. You have that power right now, not tomorrow. Not when your financial situation is better, not when you have more time or more energy or more resources. Right now, with whatever you have, wherever you are, you can begin. You can wake up tomorrow morning and produce before you consume. You can spend 15 minutes tomorrow evening asking the ownership questions. You can choose one skill and give it 1 hour tomorrow with full attention and deliberate intent. And before you sleep tomorrow night, you can ask what you did today that your future self will still be benefiting from. And then you can do it the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. The snowball is small at first, embarrassingly small. People will not see it. They will not understand what you are building. Some will mock it. The employee operating system in your own brain will resist it, will demand the old patterns, will tell you that one more episode and one more scroll and one more passive hour cannot possibly matter. But you will know the mathematics. You will know that the snowball does not stay small. You will know that the wet snow and the long hill do their work whether anyone is watching or not. You will know that the chain you are building, link by quiet link, in the routine of your daily life is the most real financial asset you possess. The door to the ownership mindset is open. It has always been open. The routine is the key. That's all. Thanks for watching.